Hi, hey, hello. I am Mars, and today I want to talk to you about all the books that I read in January. I know that we are halfway through February already, but I just started this channel, so I wanted the chance to talk about January first. I filmed all of this last night, but I'm so bad at explaining things that it was so hard to edit, so I figured I'd just try and redo this. So I'm a relatively slow reader, and January genuinely sucked with all the things that was going on in my life. And so I read 4 books. Usually I only read 3, so 4 was good. One of them was really short. Yeah, let's get into it. The first book that I finished was Golden Sun by Pierce Brown. This is the second in the Red Rising saga. And so I can't really tell you very much about the plot of this one, but I can talk you through the plot of the first book, Red Rising. This is an epic sci-fi, and in this world, everyone is separated by colors, and there is a hierarchy based on their functions and their role in society, and reds are the lowest, if not one of the lowest, in the hierarchy, and the main character, Darrow, is a red. And this whole story is about him trying to take revenge on the highest in the hierarchy, which are the golds. He loses someone very close to him within the first chapter by the hands of a gold, and his mission throughout the story is to become a gold and infiltrate the system from the inside out. And it is such a wild ride. It is an emotional roller coaster, and it's honestly one of my favorite series ever, even though I'm only on the second book. But this second book had me in a chokehold. It definitely explored a lot more of Darrow's relationships with the connections that he created, as well as revisiting old connections. And we see such a big development in his character and this sort of found family that he's created. But at the same time, this book has a lot more of a discussion on the moral dilemma that he's facing, because he is a red pretending to be a gold, and we see a lot of this morally gray dilemma playing out in his head and what he thinks about it and how it affects his decisions in this grander scale of a plot. And so I can't give away very much, but this was so emotional because we see a lot of how the grief affects him too, of how his life could have been versus what it is and what it could be in the future as well. And this is only from Darrow's perspective, so we definitely see all of his thought processes and the cracks in his facade being a gold, and his mental turmoil that he's facing. And the way that Pierce Brown writes is so, like, it's practical, but it packs a punch, and it can also be so lyrical at the same time. I recommend this series to literally almost everyone that I talk to about books, especially if they want to get into more fantasy sci-fi stuff, but only if they're interested in very brutal, gory, violent type of stories, which this one has a lot of that. But I did want to share a couple quotes from here to try and give you an idea about the writing that I love so much. Red is about family, more than any other color. It is about love amid all the horror of our world. If red rises, they have a chance to bind the worlds together. The dead can always hear us, my love. Why else do you think we sing? We want them to know that even though they are gone, we can still find joy. It's so good. If you haven't already picked up Red Rising, this is like going to be my top favorite series, one of my top favorite series ever. I can already tell because these are 5-star reads. And I am so scared to get into the next book because I just know it will get even more brutal and violent and emotional. So that'll be fun. So the next book that I read is one called Bear Watching by Bob Pastorella and Michael David Wilson. And I picked this up so that I could fulfill the buzzword challenge of having a book with the words there, or there in the title. And this book was promising in its premise, but the execution was not there. This is about a man who moves into a new apartment someplace in England and is about to start a new job. And he ends up finding a peephole in the closet that he ends up watching his neighbor, and he sort of just becomes obsessed with her. And so we see how that obsession drives him to want to protect her, and how it drives his attraction. And this is also set in a town where there's a history of shady things happening. We don't really get any background information about this town or about any of the characters. This was a really short book, and so it was compulsive in the sense that I wanted to get to where the horror started. It's classified as horror, but I don't think that the horror ever showed up. And I think that's like the only reason for me to have kept on reading, was because I wanted to be shocked. I wanted there to be something sinister that was behind everything. But it was very, very tame, and I don't feel like there was very much of a shock factor at all. The main character was very unlikable. He was annoying and lazy, and like, I don't really know the words to describe him. He was really annoying. I don't know if it's because the book was too short, but we really didn't get any explanation. There was no resolution. We got nothing. It gave me nothing. I would not recommend. I mean, like, there just wasn't enough to fuel this story, because I wanted explanations for certain choices of the settings or the characters' motivations, but it gave me nothing. I don't know. There's not really much else to talk about here. So anyways, I wanted to continue down the horror genre because I'm still trying to figure out what exactly my interests are in the horror genre. And so I picked up an author that I've been highly anticipating, and the book is A Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay. And this was very, very fun. I really like this book. It is kind of difficult to explain. There are 3 different timelines. The first is where the main character is 8 years old, and her family thinks that her older sister is being possessed by a demon. And so they bring in a priest to exorcise her, as well as they are kind of going through hard financial times, so they also allow this whole procession to be televised. So there's a whole television crew in their house. This becomes a whole show. And from the second timeline is that main character, the 8-year-old. Now I think she's 23, and she is looking back on that time and talking to a journalist who is going to be writing her story and publishing a book about her story and everything that she went through. As well as we get another sort of timeline of a blog, and there's this girl who is blogging about all of the episodes of the TV show, and she is doing side-by-side comparisons to other horror movies or books. I found that perspective to be so much fun. I think it definitely added another dimension of analyzing the whole exorcism process, and also kind of allowing us to picture things in a way where we can relate them to real movies. So I thought that part was really, really fun. The fact that the narrator is unreliable throughout the entire story definitely added another sort of aspect of mystery. Obviously, being an 8-year-old and talking about your sister's story and how she is placed within this whole family dynamic while her sister is going through this exorcism is so interesting. Because obviously there's a lot that her parents haven't told her, and a lot of conversations that she isn't part of, or a lot of things that obviously she doesn't remember. This book had a lot to say about mental health and about religion and navigating through family bonds while times are tense. And also a lot about storytelling in general, how the 2 sisters share their own stories between one another. I thought their bond was super special, and their storytelling through the TV show and through the blog. And I found it very interesting how it talked about being perceived from a different perspective, and how the main character was able to sort of cope through such tragic events. The main criticism that I have about this book, though, was that the plot twists were kind of glossed over. They were just like mentioned, and then we just kept on going. I felt like there wasn't really time for us to process the implications of the things that were mentioned, which I don't know if that was meant to just like add to the story and have us double back and be like, hold on, wait a minute, what did you just say? But the endings definitely did pack a punch. when we see how the events have affected the main character and how she is dealing with grief in her own ways, because she sort of distanced herself from the events, but at the same time she's still deeply, deeply connected to it, obviously. So yeah, I really like this book. I thought it was like a 4.5 stars. There wasn't as much horror elements in this as I anticipated, but still it was solid. It was really good. So the last book that I read in January was Cultish, The Language of Fanaticism by Amanda Montell. And this is a nonfiction talking about specifically the language that is used within cults and in order to recruit people into cults. And this uses cults as a sort of very general term, and it talks about many different types of organizations. So there's the very well-known ones, such as the Jonestown Massacre and Heaven's Gate, and as well as talking about like gym memberships and Soul Cycle. They mentioned also Scientology and multi-level marketing schemes, aka pyramid schemes. And I found this one to be very interesting. And the author's father also used to be in a cult when he was growing up. And so I think that also added another dimension of reliability. And obviously it makes sense for this writer to publish a book about cults. The information definitely wasn't overbearing or very info dumpy, but we do get a lot of information from interviews and people who are firsthand in cults and how language was being used, and very specifically about how vocabulary terms are created in order to refer to specific things within the cult organization in order to create a sense of us versus them, which is the most compelling reason for people to stay in a cult, because they feel like they are part of a community and these people get it. Personally, I am a lot more into the darker sides of cults, and so I was much more intrigued when she was talking about Jonestown and Heaven's Gate, and I already have some background information about that because I love watching documentaries about that. And so when she was talking about, Soul Cycle and gyms and marketing, I did kind of zone out a little bit, but at the same time, it did give me a different, fresh perspective about how those things are considered cults as well. And so, yeah, I definitely found it very interesting. Another thing was that I listened to it on audiobook, and some of the voices that the narrator took on in order to represent the people that were being interviewed was a little bit annoying because because they did like a very heavy Valley Girl accent, which that's fine. It was just like a little bit annoying for me. But yeah, anyways, this was very insightful into the different organizations, the use of language. I have some background in psychology, and so I've learned quite a bit about like linguistics. And so there were some new things that I learned, of course, and some other things that I have some previous knowledge on, which I found really cool to see it being applied and seeing how those things are explored in real life situations. So yeah, those were the books that I read in January. But within my reading journal, I also like to add some other things into my wrap up. So I write down what my favorite song, movie, TV show, my highlights, and my goals for the month. And so I just want to share those with you as well. As you could probably tell, my favorite book of the month was Golden Sun by Pierce Brown. My favorite song, I am very much into heavy music. I listen to deathcore, metalcore. So if you are the type of person that doesn't like screaming and aggressive things, then do not listen to this. If you're the type of person that says that, oh, how can you listen to that? They're just screaming at you. Don't listen to this song. But if you are interested into a bit heavier music, my favorite song of the month was Coma by Black Tongue featuring Matt Jones. So that's a banger. For those who do not listen to heavy music, one of my other favorite songs was an R&B song. I'm not as well versed within the genre, but I'm definitely trying to expand my music taste and the genres that I listen to. And so my other favorite song of the month was called Lady by Amindi featuring Chloe the God. My favorite movie of the month was Saltburn. Can we take a moment? This felt like an A24 film, but it wasn't. But with the director's name, like Emerald Fennell, I can only imagine great things. Like, I'm going to be watching literally everything else that she's directed because that was a masterpiece. And it is one of my missions to read books that are the same vibe as Saltburn because it was so compelling. It was addictive. It was beautiful. If you I know everyone's been talking about this, or at least I've seen it everywhere, I think, because I love it so much, and so I will talk to literally anyone about this movie. I'm not going to go into a whole fledged review about it, but I love this movie, and I will watch it again like 500 times. My favorite TV show, I didn't really have a lot of time to be watching things in January because I was studying for exams, and also a lot of life happened. But I did get a chance to watch some anime, so my favorite show was My Hero Academia. I'm only in like the second season, so I'm still very far behind, but this was fun. It was lighthearted, but also sort of getting into the more serious things and the villain's motives and stuff. My highlight of the month was visiting one of my friends for her birthday and spending a weekend with her. As well as after my first exam, I socialized quite a lot, a lot more than normal because I just got back to my university town, and so I was catching up with everyone that I haven't seen in literally like 6 or 7 months. So that was really fun. And my goal for the next month was for me to journal out my feelings, as well as studying for my exams and prepping for an internship that I will be starting at the end of February. And since we are in the middle of February now, I will say that I finished my last exam. I don't know how it went, but we will see. And I'm very excited for the internship that I'll be starting soon. But I do have quite a bit of time before then, so I definitely think that I will be reading a lot more books than usual this month. And I am putting more of an emphasis on Black authors since it is Black History Month. Obviously, as anyone should do, I diversify my reading all year long, but this month I am putting a lot more priority of reading books by Black authors, and I'm really excited about the titles that I'm going to be reading. So stay tuned to see what those books are that I will have read by the end of this month. Thank you so much for joining me and listening to me ramble. I hope you have an amazing day and an amazing reading month. And if you want to leave me a comment about your favorite book that you read in January, I would love to hear your recommendations. Thank you so much. I will see you again soon.